Massive gap between this brand's modern status and the incredibly gritty origins of its founder is just staggering. Today, we're going to unpack the DNA of this multi-billion-dollar empire. And to really do it justice, we're going to frame the story with the fast-paced, kinetic energy of an animation, because that's exactly how this brand was built. Let's strip away that polished veneer and look at the raw engine underneath. Now, picture this animated before your eyes. A sleek, 2026 Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding silently through a rainy, neon-lit city at night. You can totally picture that iconic hood ornament gleaming in the streetlights, right? But then, snap. Just like a flash transition in a storyboard, we cut completely out of that modern luxury and land with a thud in a bleak, black-and-white 1870s London. Specifically, we're in the freezing mud of a 19th century English cornfield. And there, standing in the cold, is a 4-year-old boy. He's just waving a stick, scaring away birds so he can earn enough to buy a single piece of bread. That shivering little boy, that's Henry Royce. The odds stacked against young Henry were astronomical. It was a brutal sequence for survival. If you can, imagine a rapid-fire animated montage of his childhood. First, his father tragically dies. Step 2, at just 9 years old, he's thrust into the harsh workforce of extreme poverty. Step 3, he's running through cobblestone streets, selling newspapers under gas lamps in the early morning. Step 4, he's delivering telegrams deep into the night. And step 5, which is perhaps the most shocking thing for a future engineering genius, he only had 2 years of formal schooling. I mean, his childhood wasn't really a childhood at all. It was a relentless, everyday battle for survival, usually on an empty stomach. So you might be wondering, how in the world does a starving kid with 2 years of education go on to build the most prestigious car company on earth? Well, Henry possessed this rare, almost borderline obsessive trait, an unyielding demand for absolute perfection. This wasn't just, a strong work ethic. It was literally his ultimate weapon. Despite the freezing cold and the empty stomach he grew up with, his mind was just wired to accept nothing less than absolute precision in everything he touched. And that obsession paid off incredibly quickly. Just look at his rapid workaholic rise. At age 14, thanks to a small financial gift from his aunt, he lands an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway. And this was it. This was his true calling. By night, he would skip meals just to tinker with mechanical components. Fast forward to age 21, with only £20 to his name, he co-founds an electrical machinery shop, and the business absolutely boomed. He went from this tiny room to a bustling factory floor with over 100 workers. So by 1902, he was actually a wealthy man. But large American corporations were entering the market, and the massive stress of competing took a really severe toll on his failing health. Which leads us to this incredibly ironic quote. Picture Henry rubbing his temples, totally exhausted, and his doctor gives him a simple prescription for relaxation. Get fresh air and buy a car. The comedy of errors here is just perfect. The doctor honestly thought a casual drive would calm the stressed-out workaholic down. But as you'll see, putting an obsessive perfectionist behind the wheel of an early 20th century automobile was basically like throwing gasoline on a fire. Because this is what Henry bought, a second-hand French de Carville. And it was an absolute nightmare for a mechanical engineer. I mean, the car was incredibly noisy. It vibrated violently. It suffered from chronic overheating. And to top the whole shebang off, the brakes were terrifyingly weak. Imagine Henry looking utterly furious sitting in this vibrating, smoke-billowing contraption as a wheel pops off. Instead of relaxing him, this terrible French car just sent him into a state of absolute fury. So, what do you do when you're a perfectionist and your so-called relaxing hobby literally falls apart around you? You tear every single screw out of that terrible machine and you build a masterpiece. Henry completely redesigned the entire thing from the ground up, engineering his own prototype, the Royce 10. It was a 2-cylinder car, but the engineering was so flawless that it was unbelievably quiet and smooth. It was so perfect, in fact, that it began turning the heads of London's elite. Section 1. When opposites attract, the missing half of the equation. Let's treat this next part like an animated split screen. On the left side we have Henry Royce, the gritty, grease-covered engineer from absolute poverty with basically no formal schooling. And on the right side, bursting into the frame, is Charles Rolls. Charles was born into immense wealth and privilege. He was a dashing aristocrat, Cambridge-educated, constantly surrounded by high society friends, and he absolutely loved racing early automobiles. Now, Charles ran a luxury car dealership in London, but he hated selling foreign imports. He was desperate for a high-quality, reliable British car to offer his wealthy clientele. In December 1904, inside a brand Manchester hotel, these two totally opposite worlds collided. Charles was finally convinced to test drive Henry's quiet little 2-cylinder car. So he turns the key and his eyes just widen in sheer shock at how utterly silent the engine was. He was completely mesmerized. That very night, Charles declared to his partner, "I've just found the greatest motor engineer in the world." And right then and there, the legendary alliance was forged. Henry would build them and Charles would sell them. Rolls-Royce was born. And that brings us to this massive number, 15,000. I really want you to feel the impact of that, because in 1907, to prove the unmatched reliability of their new Silver Ghost model, the young company pulled off a completely spectacular publicity stunt. They drove the Silver Ghost for exactly 15,000 miles, non-stop, day and night, through all sorts of varying conditions, and they did it without a single mechanical failure. No way, right? Legend actually has it that the engine was so smooth, you could balance a glass of water on it, perfectly still while it was running. This vibrant triumph cemented their brand prestige instantly. The press was so astounded by the 15,000-mile stunt that they immediately crowned the Silver Ghost the best car in the world, and the brand just skyrocketed. The gritty engineer and the dashing aristocrat had officially conquered the automotive landscape. Section 2. Tragedy, Triumph, and War. The Dark Pivot. But you know, with great triumph often comes devastating tragedy. Our animated storyboard takes a dark turn here. Charles Rolls had grown deeply obsessed with early aviation, and in 1910, while flying a biplane, the tail literally snapped off midair. The plane crashed, and Charles Rolls tragically lost his life at just 33 years old. He became the first British citizen to ever die in an aviation accident. Henry Royce was absolutely devastated. He had lost his partner, his salesman, his literal opposite half. And on top of that, his own health was severely failing him once again. He was left to run the empire entirely alone. And then, the world fundamentally changed. Before 1914, Rolls-Royce was known solely as the pinnacle of civilian luxury cars. But when World War I erupted, the British military desperately needed high-performance engineering just to survive. So Henry pivoted the company from luxury to survival, transforming the Silver Ghost into heavy armored desert war machines fitted with machine guns. Furthermore, Henry engineered the Rolls-Royce Eagle. This was a massive V-12 aircraft engine that literally powered Allied planes to victory. This single pivot secured the company's future in the sky. Through the Great Depression, that same absolute resilience kept them not just surviving, but actually conquering. By 1931, Rolls-Royce was strong enough to buy out their fiercest rival, Bentley. But look at 1933. This is what you should truly take away from this explainer. Henry Royce, the boy who started by scaring birds in the freezing mud, worked until his literal dying breath. On the eve of his death at age 70, he was lying in bed, still sketching a new perfected design for an adjustable shock absorber. The obsession never faded. Fast forward to today, and let's look at the colossal impact of that lifelong obsession. $84 billion. Decades later, the company split its automotive and aerospace divisions, but that philosophy of perfection remained absolutely identical. Today, the Rolls-Royce aerospace sector alone, which is the legacy of that V-12 Eagle engine, is valued at over $84 billion. That is just staggering. Which brings our narrative perfectly full circle. Today, we watch glitzy montages of celebrities, monarchs, and the current lineup. You know, the Ghost, the Cullinan, and the ultra-exclusive $30 million La Rose Noir droptail. From a starving street boy selling newspapers to the absolute icon of global luxury, Henry Royce proved that if you chase absolute perfection in your craft, the entire world will eventually chase you. I want to leave you with this final thought. Henry Royce took a childhood of insurmountable odds and channeled it into a relentless, lifelong demand for excellence. I mean, he was literally sketching engineering upgrades on his deathbed. So, looking at his incredible journey, what is your pursuit of perfection? Think about that as you go about your day. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.